Hello, good morning everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar. The first of two we've got this morning. We have another one running straight after this one at 11 o'clock looking at journal corrections. But for now, we're going to be looking at the company archive feature and looking at some of the common myths around archiving your data and how you can take an archive and also how to access the data afterwards. So this session is a quick learn, so this should last up to 30 minutes, depending on the number of questions we get there. So it's a slightly shorter session than your usual ones. Okay, so we'll just do some housekeeping first of all. So first of all, as normal, you will notice that you've been placed on mute. That means you can't speak to us today, but if you do have any questions, please do submit them using the questions panel. So that icon is the one that looks like a speech bubble with the question mark in the middle, and that will allow you to send your questions across to myself this morning. In addition, there is a handout, so if you wish to take a copy of the slides that we're going through today, then you can do so using the icon. It looks like a document with the folder corner, and that has a copy of today's slides. But as usual, after today's session, you will have a follow-up email, and in that email will be a link to our recordings page. So if you do need to watch anything back, a recording will be made available to you. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover today. So first of all, we want to be really clear on what a company archive is, and then we'll show you how to take a company archive, how to access a company archive, and then we're going to try and clarify the difference between an archive, a backup, and the clear audit trail process. And at the end, they will cover off any frequently asked questions that we quite commonly get on these sessions time and time again. Like I say, then we'll move on to the summary, and if there's any final questions, we'll try and get those answered for you. Okay, so let's start with what is a company archive. So a company archive isn't the process of moving data out of your software, okay? It's the process by which you're going to take a read-only copy of your live data as it is at that point of time that you click on the archive function. So it takes that read-only copy for you and it moves it to a slightly different location alongside your live data, and it's there essentially so that you can go back into all the data. When you take that archive, it includes any login details that were applied at the time the archive was taken. So if you've got logins with passwords, those passwords will remain on that archive. With the archive, you can't add anything new to it in terms of transactions. Okay, so you couldn't go into an archive and start processing because the purpose of the archive is it's there for reporting purposes. But you can edit certain records for GDPR purposes, so removing things like contact names and personal information. You do need to have the relevant permissions to access the archive, so you need to make sure that you're logging in as manager or a user who has been granted access to that feature. So as I said, it gives you access to historical data. So it means that you can go back into an archive, you can look at the figures, and then you can run reports on that data. So typically it's run around the same time as your year end, because once you've run a year end process, your data moves on a financial year, and there may be reports you wish to run which are reliant on the financial year of that data. So you almost sort of lose the ability to do that, or it makes it a bit more difficult once you've moved into the next financial year. But if you have the archive there, then you have the ability to go back to that point in time and run any reports you may need to do so. So the key thing here is it does not remove transactions. Okay, so quite often we do get the question around, will it remove data? Does it mean I can still access that data? It does not remove transactions. It takes a snapshot of your data and is normally a step that you would take just before removing data in a process called the clear audit trail. So the archive file is saved alongside your data path, and I'll show you a bit more of that when we're doing the demonstration, but it doesn't include any attachments. So that is a common question we get on this session. Attachments won't be included. And the final one there is quite a key one, is you need to have access to the software to be able to view the archive. So if you were ending your journey with Sage and you still wanted to have access to your data for say 6 or 7 years for VAT purposes, you wouldn't just be able to access the archive. You do still need to use Sage software to access that data. Okay, so that is what an archive is. And we're just going to talk about how to take that archive and when you might take an archive. So as I said, it takes a snapshot of your data. So typically you're going to try and take an archive before you do something big in your data. So typically you would take one at the point of running your year end. Just before you run the year end, you want a copy of that data as it is at that final point of that financial year. But also you may want to do it before you do some clearing out of data. So if you're going to do any of the big functions like a clear audit trail, which will remove data from your transaction screen, or if you're going to be removing large sort of volumes of data from things like your invoices, your credits, your orders, then again, you might want to take an archive at that point. So really, it's up to you when you take the archive. However, when you run your year end, it does almost force you into an archive. So you might not know that you've been taking archives in the past because it does automatically select that box for you. Okay, so just going to go through some of the frequently asked questions here, first of all. In fact, what we'll do is we'll do the demonstration first and we'll come back to those frequently asked questions because I think that'll flow a little bit nicer for you. So I'm just going to pop onto my data set. I just want to show you how easy it is to take an archive and how easy it is to access the archive as well. Okay, so I'm in a data set here, okay, and the main way you're going to do an archive is probably at your year end, as I just mentioned there. So when you've done all of your year end checks, you come to run the year end through Tools, Period End, and Year End. You get the Year End Wizard. And the fourth option here is to take an archive. Okay, now it's automatically ticked. So that means you might not even know that you've taken this archive. So my recommendation would be leave that tick in there. It's trying to do something that might become useful for you down the line when somebody comes to you just after you've run your end, and rather than restoring a backup, you'll have that option to go into the archive data. What we can do is we can have a look at the archive location. So if I just pop into this button here, in here, we can't change the archive location. So that's going alongside my live data. So my live data would be in company 002 in this case, and in an ACK data folder. So it sits alongside the live data. We can't change that, okay, but you could subsequently take that data elsewhere if you needed an additional copy. But we do recommend to leave it where it is so that the software can locate it easily. The description can be changed, okay? So at the moment, it is going to call mine year-end 2025. I am in a data set that starts in January 2025, so it's going to call that year-end 2025. But this can be renamed, okay? And also the archive folder can be renamed, so we can change those options. Now I am going to quickly just run a year-end in this data set because I'd like to show you the difference between a year-end archive and a mid-year archive. So I'm going to just run a year end. Now, bear in mind, we're just assuming I've done all these other steps, okay? It won't take long for mine to run through. Yours will, because yours will have actual live data in there. But when we've run the year end process, I've got to the end there very quickly. I'll just cancel out of the year end report because that's not what we're covering today. But that's taken my archive, okay? So that means if now someone said, go and run me a report up to the end of 2025, it's not as easy in this data set because I'm now in 2026, but I can do by accessing the archive. Now I'll show you how to access that in just a moment. What I want to show you is the option to take an archive at other times. Okay, so you don't want to always run a year end just to get an archive. You might be doing, like I say, something like a clear audit trail, and you don't always necessarily do that alongside your year end. You might do it 6 months down the line. So you can do an archive at any time. To do that, you need to pop into Tools, Period End, and Archive Company. Got the option there. And this window looks pretty much the same as it does when you go into the year-end window, but what you'll notice is the descriptions are updated slightly differently. So rather than saying year-end 2026, it's now telling me it's a mid-year archive. And you could change that. Rather than mid-year, it might be you're about to do a clear audit trail. You might want to call it something along those lines, so it's easy to locate that that's the archive that I took just before I ran a clear audit trail. So you could put something like pre-cat. The archive folder name is the financial year we're in, word mid-year, and then it has the date and the timestamps on there too. Again, if you wanted to rename that because it's not exactly the most pretty on the eye, then you could change that folder name should you want to, but I'm going to leave that be for the time being. And again, I'm going to click on OK, and it's taken the archive for me. Just bear in mind, yours may take slightly longer. So that's how easy it is to take an archive, and that's why I always suggest, if you're not sure, just take the archive. It's always better to have too many than not enough. But bear in mind, it will start to take up space on your file or wherever your data is located. So just kind of weigh that up. So really, 2 or 3 archives a year would probably be more than enough, but definitely your year-end archive is what I would suggest. So to access those archives, that's quite easy to do. So you can go into File at any time, and providing you've got the correct permissions to do so, if you go into Open, then you do have the option for Company Archive. And this will give you a list of all your previous archives that you have. So as you can see, I've done 4 archives in the past. I did one at the year end of 2024, I did one in the mid-year, and I've also got one, the ones that I've just done there now. So you can see when the archive was taken. If we rename the file, like we have done here, that's been updated, and also the version number too. Now, if you found that you had an archive from a previous version, the version would indicate an older version number. Now, just like your live data, when you move up a version, you need to go through a conversion process. Okay, so it's exactly the same with your archive. So if you do need to convert your data, just make sure you've got a backup of your archive first. And I'll show you in a second how you can include that in your backup. So I'm going to just open this one that I've just taken. Okay, so I click on Open, and it asks me to log on just like normal. Okay, so I'm just going to pop my password in. And there we go. That is me in the archive. Okay, so the benefit of this is I haven't had to overwrite any data by restoring over my live data. It's just opened up the archive in my software. I can tell it's the archive because at the top it says archive. And if I was to go into customers, for example, and try to pop a batch invoice on, just as an example, remember it won't allow me to post any transactions. So it's telling me here the option is not available when in an archive data set when in read-only mode. So I can't do any transactions, but I can certainly go into my nominal codes and run things like my trial balance, which I'm just running now. There we go. So I can run my reports on there. So I can't post anything transactional, but I can run reports and look at the figures there. Changes that can be made, however, are changes to personal data. So if we go into customers and say, for example, we do have a customer who's asked for their data to be removed under the right to be forgotten, we can go into the record, just bring that across, And for example, if it was Jim that wanted his data removed, we can remove him from there, save the record, and his contact details have now been removed. So there are some elements of editing that can be carried out, but no transactions can be added in. So that was just through File and Open, and then Company Archive. To get back to live data though, we can go to File, Open, Open Company Data, and that just takes us back to our live data where it asks us to log back in there. And we know we're back in the live data because looking along the top, there is no reference to archive there. And again, into customers, batch invoice, it now opens up a processing screen. So it looks identical to your live data. So that is the company archive. Now I did mention earlier just about taking a backup of archive data. You can do so through File and into Backup. When you do a backup, you can either add a company archive onto your backup by ticking the company archives option, or it is also possible to take an archive only backup. So you're not taking a backup of any of your data, but you are taking the company archives, and it will take all of them. So if you've got 10 archives, it will back them all up for you. What you might want to just do with this though is just pop something in the file name to say archive only backup, just so you're aware that's archives only. And that backup just looks like a normal backup process there as it runs through. Now, obviously it's taking a backup of 4 archives, so that's taken longer than my normal backup, but still quite quick on my data set compared to someone who's maybe processing on a daily basis. So that's essentially how easy it is to take an archive and how easy it is to access an archive. So this is where we're going to go back to the slides and we're going to have a look at those frequently asked questions. So the first one, okay, is once you've archived, can you delete old records you no longer use, such as customers, suppliers, or nominals? So this one is one we get a lot, okay? So you can delete old records such as customers, nominals, and suppliers in your data set, even if you haven't taken an archive, providing they meet other criteria. So you do need to run something called a clear audit trail first. So if you've got a customer that you'd like to remove from your software, you need to first make sure that that customer has no activity remaining on the record. Now, to achieve that, you have to do a clear audit trail, not an archive. But before you do a clear audit trail, we recommend an archive so that if you do ever need to go back into that customer and run any reports, although they're not in your live data, their data is available somewhere for you. So it's a bit of a tricky question. Once you've archived, can you remove those data? So yes, but archiving is just part of the process to reduce the size of your data. Okay, it's the clear audit trail that gets you to a point where you can start to remove customers, suppliers, and nominals. The next one is, do I have to specify a date to run an archive to? So again, I think this ties in with lots of people getting this confused with the clear audit trail process. So the archive literally will take the snapshot of your data as you press archive. Okay, it doesn't ask for any date ranges. But when you clear data out, so when you start with clearing audit trail, it does ask you, what date do you want to clear your audit trail up to? Okay, so if you want to keep 2 years in your data, you'll probably clear it up to the end of 2022, for example. So it's a clear audit trail that asks you to specify a date to clear up to. And then the last one there is, how is this affected if I stop using Sage? So it's a really good one. You know, lots of people do sort of come to the end of their business. They may be moving to retirement. They still need to keep hold of that data, okay? But to use an archive, you do need to have access to a Sage software with a valid license. And it might be that your accountant holds on to that. Otherwise, we recommend exporting all of your reports beforehand. Okay, so next few slides, what we're going to do is just go through the difference between a few of the different functions and what normally gets confused with an archive. So we get lots of people say, well, isn't a backup good enough? Okay, so the difference between them is the archive's a read-only copy. Okay, you don't need to open it over the top of your live data. It opens alongside your data. So effectively, your live data remains touched. When you back up, you have to find somewhere to restore that. Okay, so if you were to restore back to a backup from last year, in some versions, you need to restore that over live data. And that can be risky because you're overwriting your live everyday data. Now, yes, you can get around that by just taking a quick backup before you do so, but it does make people nervous. Now, in version 30.1, we have introduced the option to restore into practice data. Okay, so this is a relatively new feature. It allows you to restore into the practice data temporarily so that you can run your reports, but when you come back out, it will remove that data. So it's only a temporary solution, but that is another option for protecting your data and not worrying about restoring a backup over your live data. So the next one is the difference between an archive and a clear audit trail. Okay, so quite often we get people on this archive session who are looking to remove data. Okay, it's not the archive you're looking for. The archive is a step we recommend first, but the next step is the clear audit trail. And the clear audit trail is the process of removing transactions from your audit trail up to the date that you pick. So we don't specify that. And the transactions have to meet certain criteria to be removed. So they have to be fully paid. They have to be bank reconciled if they're a bank transaction. If it's applicable for VAT, they have to be VAT reconciled, and they can't be linked to any other transaction that also doesn't meet that criteria. So there's quite a bit of criteria they need to meet before you can clear that data out. But clearing audit trail will allow you to reduce the size of your data files, and also once you've cleared those audit trails, you may start to see that customers and suppliers, their activity has cleared down, which means you can potentially remove those records too. Now we have got a dedicated session on Clear Audit Trail. So if you were thinking today was going to be about removing data, please check out our upcoming sessions and our recordings. If we don't have a live session yet, we will have one in January. Absolutely guarantee we will have in January because everyone's after clearing out data in the new year. So we will have one in January if we have not already got one, but there is a recording. So if you can't wait, you want to get some clearing out done, there is a recording available on our recordings page. And like I say, the link for that will be in your follow-up email later today. Okay, these sessions do go very quickly, these quick learn sessions. So I'm just going to run through a little summary there. So this is a really good opportunity. If you've got any questions around archiving your data, then please do get those typed across to me and we'll try and get those covered before we end the session at past there. So first of all, just to reiterate, archiving creates a read-only copy of your data, and that includes all historical and the current information up to the point that you click on Create Archive. It will not remove transactions, so it's almost like doubling up on your data, but putting it into a different location, ready for you to do something like a clear audit trail. Remember, you can take an archive at any time. It's not to be done like a backup. We suggest a daily backup. Clearing audit trail, archiving doesn't need to be done daily. It's normally as part of those big routines. So like running your year end or clearing audit trail. Do remember, if you're trying to access an archive from 5 years ago, it will need the login details that were applied 5 years ago. If you have problems with that, then give our team a quick call. They will be able to do an unlocking on that, providing you can pass security with us. but it allows you to view that historical data. So it means that your live data can have the most up-to-date information. You can clear out all the data, but if you do need to go back for audit purposes, you still have that data available. And remember, you can't do any processing in your archive, but you can go and remove data to keep in line with GDPR if you got a GDPR request. Okay, so a quick one there is, how do you open an archive on an older version? So just pop back. So if you do have an older version, just pop back onto this old one, you would still go into File and Open in Company Archive. You would have any archives from older versions sitting here, which show you the version number. So say, for example, if this one here said version 28, I'd still just open as normal, but what it would do is it will just indicate that it's from an earlier data set that I need to do that conversion step. So you're probably familiar with conversion. When you move up to a different version of the software, it needs to convert the data. So it's exactly the same for your archive. So like I say, just before you do that, do log in, take a backup of the archives first, just to be on the safe side. Archives have been available for years, so if you're still using an older version like 27 or 28, you will still have the archive feature. So any archives that have been created, you will be able to access. Okay, keep your questions coming. I'm just going to very quickly talk about our upcoming webinars. So like I say, we're back at 11 o'clock today. I'm just going to try and bring this one across here. We're back at 11 o'clock today, and we are covering journal corrections. So Michael will be taking you through those. We're going through a correction series at the moment. So I've just gone onto the help centre, sage.co.uk/help. I've typed in the word webinar, and you can see here we've got a link to the recordings. We've got the correction series, which is what is happening at 11. And we've got the general webinars. So this is a list of all our webinars that are booked up to the end of December at the moment. So at the top here, we have links to the correction series. So the customers and suppliers are now complete, but you can see we've got quite a few sessions coming up there. So we've got multiple sessions available. And if there's no longer available, then you can access the recording. But on top of that, we've got things like filter and quick search, quick fixes in your data to help you pinpoint the data that you need to access. We've got invoice payments on Friday, so getting paid with Stripe and PayPal. And also next week, we'll be returning to our VAT series as well. So lots of topics coming up. And as you can see, into December, we're going to be covering some of the topics around year end. So global changes, making changes to multiple records in one go, adding festive messages onto your invoice and statements, and right the way up to running year end, and also foreign trader, one we haven't visited for a while there. So have a look, get yourself registered for those sessions, and in the new year we'll be looking to do that sort of clear out series where we look at different modules in your software. How can you clear them out? How can you make them run a bit more smoothly for you? Okay, I said this would last approximately 30 minutes. We're pretty much bang on time there, and there doesn't seem to be many questions. A very quiet session this morning. We don't have many of you joining us today, but we are pretty much on past there. So fingers crossed you'll be joining us on another session really soon. We'll look to end the session there as there's no further outstanding questions. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. And like I say, we'll hope to see you on another session real soon. But in the meantime, take care and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.